All right, this is Docendo number 50. So let's look at the sentence. As editors, even though I had expected that returning to the old fishing hole would evoke memories of my father, I didn't know that I would become so emotional. So notice this starts with subordinated conjunction. So this is clearly a dependent clause. Even though I had expected that returning to the old fishing hole. Old fishing hole. Well, hole is the wrong hole here, right? We want just the H hole. And we have two adjectives, and we wouldn't say fishing old hole, would we? So therefore, we want to get rid of that comma. Just old fishing hole. Evoke memories of my father. I didn't know that I would become so emotional. So we have a long opening dependent clause here that is separated from the subject, which is I. So the independent clause is, I didn't know that I would become so emotional. So this would be your classic complex sentence that begins with a dependent clause and followed by an independent clause. So evoke is a verb to call forth as memories or feelings. And provoke to stimulate or incite someone to do or feel something. Now, both of those come from Latin, to call or voice. So it kind of makes sense. Evoke as in calling something to mind, provoke as in stimulating something you're calling out. All kinds of other words that have that Latin root. Advocate, provoke, vociferous, equivocate, all those have something to do with speaking or calling out. So make sure we got everything here. We got rid of the comma. We changed the correct spelling to whole with no W. And we've got the subordinating comma that separates the dependent clause from the independent clause. All right, some definitions from earlier on. What would you call an attitude of suspicion where you believe the future is bleak and that people are acting only out of self-interest? It'd be nice to have one word for that. Also, a tendency to see the worst, most negative aspect of things or believe that the worst will happen. Those both seem kind of negative, and if you remember, one of those was cynicism and the other is pessimism. So cynicism is an attitude of suspicion where you believe the future is bleak and that people are acting only out of self-interest. That's a very negative way of seeing it. Pessimism is that idea of seeing the glass half empty rather than half full, opposite of optimism. Okay, now a while back we talked about participial phrases. Remember those phrases where you have a verb, sometimes ing present, sometimes past tense, that works as an adjective, and it's a phrase that modifies a subject in a sentence. Well, the problem is you can run into a problem with these if you don't edit carefully, if you don't put them in the correct space. So take a look at this sentence. Oozing slowly across the floor, Marvin watched the salad dressing. So notice we have this participial phrase, oozing slowly across the floor. The problem is it's not close enough to what it's modifying. It should be modifying salad dressing. And because it is next to Marvin, it gives a false picture, doesn't it? So when you use participial phrases, use them, but make sure that they are clear. So obviously read them aloud, ask yourself, is that close enough to what it's modifying, in this case salad rather than Marvin, so that it's clear. Here's another one. Waiting for the Snickers bar, the candy machine began to hum loudly. Notice in that case, we have an understood subject, but it gets confused because we have waiting for the Snickers bar next to the candy machine. So we need to edit that. Waiting for the Snickers bar, I began, as I waited for the Snickers bar, the candy machine began to hum. That would be a way of changing it. You have to have the subject in there somewhere. Coming out of the market, the bananas fell on the pavement. Again, there's another one where the subject should be more clear, that it's a person, not the bananas. Number 4, she handed out brownies to the children stored in plastic containers. So obviously in that case, we need to have the children and the plastic containers separated She handed out brownies stored in plastic containers to the children. Again, the idea here, notice that's a past participle stored in plastic containers, describes the brownies. We just needed to have it closer to what it's modifying. So these are just, again, remember we said the participial phrases are kind of like verbs that work like adjectives, and you just need to make sure that they're close enough to what they modify so that it makes sense. So I smelled the oysters coming down the stairs for dinner. Again, you might write that without really thinking about it, but if you edit it, you think, oh, that gives an odd image of the oysters coming down the stairs. I need to fix that. Coming down the stairs for dinner, I smelled oysters. So participial phrases, great to use, but watch out because you can create some unintended problems if you don't edit and revise carefully. All right, that is Docendo 50.